horseshoe is back.
What is going on, Colts Nation, and welcome back to Bring the Juice. Week number 2 for the Indianapolis Colts after a week 1 loss at the hands of the Seattle Seahawks. The Colts stay in the NFC. They stay in the same division, actually. They host the Los Angeles Rams, the 1-0 Los Angeles Rams. And so we thought no better guest to bring on than somebody who, just like us, covers the team pretty hardcore. Trent from Rams Talk YouTube channel out there. Trent, how you doing, man? How you feeling? Week 1, Rams 1-0. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for reaching out and letting me join you guys, just talking football and talking this week's matchup. But I'm overall feeling really good about this year's Rams team and just can't wait for Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cody said it. You guys are obviously 1-0. Start out the season on the right note. The Colts obviously couldn't do that, but we hope to try to get back on track. Overall, like so far from what you saw, I know it's a small sample size, but how do you feel about this team going on from what you just saw in week 1?
I mean, I'm riding. I'm euphoric, to be honest, because with week 1, last week, no one really knows how their teams are going to perform, especially with new players. You guys have Wentz, new QB. How's that going to work out? We have Stafford, new QB. How's that really going to work out? So, always a lot of player movement in the offseason. So when you go to week 1, everyone is optimistic, but there's just everything is uncertain. So the way things played out, especially, the Bears defense is no slouch. And just how the Rams looked was really electric. And coming off of a quarterback like Jared Goff, who I'm not going to speak ill about because I think all Rams fans generally like Jared Goff, but we realize his limitations in seeing what Matt Stafford brought, the different dynamic he brought, the long, explosive, plays, that first bomb he had. I mean, that just in SoFi Stadium, it just was it was a very good start to a promising year.
Awesome.
Yeah, and before we kind of dive into this, we could talk about some of the injury reports coming out. The Colts obviously a little bit more banged up than the Rams, at least right now. And I don't know what it is, man, about this year with the Colts, but they just cannot get past the injuries. It seems like it's becoming a big trend with this team. They've got a lot of guys that, are either limited or did not practice. Some notable guys, Darius Leonard with the ankle. He also is dealing with a sickness today. Quentin Nelson's dealing with a foot and back injury that it feels like he's been dealing with forever. He didn't practice. Xavier Rhodes dealing with the calf, did not practice. Braden Smith dealing with a foot that he developed after the loss. It didn't practice as well. Some guys that were limited, though, Eric Fisher with the Achilles, Kamoko Ture with the groin, Kwity Paye dealing with a hamstring injury. I know he didn't practice today. Al-Qadim Muhammad also dealing with an injury. And then really for the Rams, there really wasn't a whole lot of guys of note. I mean, Alshon Robinson with the knee, and then Sebastian Joseph Day were the only guys that didn't practice that weren't rest days. So the Rams seem like they're a pretty healthy team. What have you seen from this injury report? Is there any guys that you're maybe concerned who aren't going to potentially play this week?
No, I mean the Alshon Robinson thing, it's limited. And so when anytime something is limited, you feel, fairly optimistic about it. But when someone hasn't practiced all week at all, that's where it kind of gets tricky. And usually Aaron Donald and Andrew Whitworth always get rest days. There are a couple guys on the team that they always kind of manage, so they get rest days, but you don't really read anything into it. So I think for the most part, Rams are coming in pretty healthy. And I guess I flip it back to you. I think out of those guys that you mentioned for the Colts, which ones do you feel are less likely to play, like Rhodes or I was trying to remember. So Leonard, how are you feeling about your injury report?
Well, I mean, I think Nelson is more precautionary than anything. He was having some back flare-ups to start last week also, and he played in that game regardless. So I think they're more just keeping an eye out for that. Leonard, I think he's going to play. Haven't heard anything drastic on why he wouldn't. I think, again, just probably dealing with some ankle soreness. Rhodes, I don't know if he's going to play or not. I mean, we expected him to play last week and he didn't. And apparently the Colts were saying that this calf injury was worse than what they originally thought it was. So guessing he's going to be out. And my best guess is Braden Smith doesn't play at right tackle for the Colts this Sunday, which will absolutely suck because not only will you have potentially Eric Fisher not playing, and even if he does, it would be his first game of the season, first time he'd be seeing any kind of live reps at all this season. Then you would just be missing your right tackle who you just paid a lot of money to play. So, I mean, the Colts are in a very, very bad situation right now when it comes to the injury front.
Yeah, it's almost comical at this point. Like, it seems like every time we get another guy healthy, somebody goes out.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is the deal here, guys? Like, something has to change. This is just getting absolutely ridiculous at this point. We're in week 2, guys, and we're already having all these injury reports coming out. And guys already missing. It's like, how did we not have this coming? Some of the things just kind of happened, but it's just wild to me, all the injuries the Colts have, and getting ridiculous at this point. But you know what? I guess we'll have to see what happens with some of these guys. Hopefully a few of these guys, these key players, could get back to practice tomorrow on Friday and then, are ready to go. But yeah, it's just not a pretty injury report for the Colts right now. It's kind of disappointing, honestly, with how we know how high the team's expectations were this year. And to just get off to this poor start already, with the Seahawks loss, the units didn't play well. And now to just have seriously adding insult to injury almost. It's just insane to me that this keeps happening.
Yeah. Do you guys do they play a lot of the Colts starters in the preseason at all, or do they pretty much rest all the first, like the Darius Leonards and the Quentin? I mean, I know Quentin Nelson didn't play because of injuries, but like most of the other guys, Darius Leonard, do they usually play in the preseason at all?
Maybe a few series, but nothing like insane. Like, I think it's pretty regular around the league. So it's just jarring that this stuff keeps happening to our best players too. Like, it's not like, reserve defensive linemen or something like that. Like, this would be the equivalent of some of your guys' best players, the Aaron Donalds, those type of players getting injured and just like out of nowhere, just like, why does this keep happening? He gets back, another guy goes out or is on the injury report. It just gets ridiculous. And it gets draining after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully though, with Fisher and Rhodes, like those guys, if they didn't play this week, then most likely they'd be back the following week. Or if they play this week, they're limited. Like, they're hopefully coming back. You know what I mean? They're not guys that are just dropping off now, like Leonard or Braden Smith. So now, what do you think about your offensive line? I know that, Nelson's banged up. Smith probably won't play. Fisher is 50-50. I know that was a strength. Like, whenever I thought of the Colts, I thought, oh man, their offensive line, their defense, the running game, QB a little questionable, but like the offensive line was the stalwart.
Yeah, we've definitely had a heyday, over that whole thing. So we've kind of talked about it numerous times now. I try not to talk about it much anymore because we said our piece about it, but they were just god awful last week. And, with the injuries they keep piling up right now, I mean, it's unbelievable. And then on top of it, we're about to face a very solid defensive line, one of the better defensive lines in all of football. And now your right tackle may not be able to play. Your left guard is, dealing with injuries, and your left tackle may or may not play. So, I have no idea. I am scared for Carson Wentz's life, to be honest, on Sunday. At least that's just me.
Yeah, I think Aaron Donald. If the two tackles aren't playing, then when I saw this game on the schedule, when the schedules first came out, I thought instantly Aaron Donald versus Quentin Nelson. I thought this is going to be like the matchup to watch, just best going on best. But if those two tackles don't play, I really don't see the Rams putting Aaron Donald anywhere near Quentin Nelson and having him attack some of these other softer spots. So that'll be really interesting to see how the injuries affect where they line Aaron Donald up.
Yeah. It seriously will, man. And yeah, this offensive line, it was so, I think we have and everybody has those high expectations for that offensive line. So it was absolutely jarring and embarrassing that they allowed 14 hits on Carson Wentz last week. I mean, that is not their game. Like, that is not what they're about. I mean, and pretty much everybody was relatively healthy. So it was very odd that that happened. And it's not like this was against, you guys. It was against the Seahawks, who aren't, they have a decent defensive line, but it's not like, oh my gosh, look, they have studs everywhere. So I am freaking terrified, honestly, of trying to go against your guys' defensive line with our tackles, even if they play not 100%. It's scary, man, because like Carson Wentz, I thought all things considered, getting sacked 4 times, hit 14 times, I thought he played pretty well. I mean, he was the biggest concern, right? We had a lot of concerns and questions on Carson Wentz, and he was like the one that I had the least concerns about after week 1. So it's just very weird that this is happening. And hopefully, like I said, these guys get back to being at least limited tomorrow. So we have a little bit more hope that, they might both play. And if they do, then I'll feel a little bit better. But still, I mean, even if these guys were 100%, I was still like nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so yeah, we talked about Carson Wentz, he was one of the best players on our team last Sunday. And, he was the biggest question mark. And now he's actually the least questioned player on the offense right now when it comes to all things considered. So, he had 251 yards against Seattle, had a couple runs for scrambles as well, had a 66 completion percentage as well. So, overall was very efficient, but he never really had a lot of those big plays. And obviously that was a lot of that had to do with the offensive line and some of the other skill position players really not doing their job as much. But I mean, overall, what's your perception on what you saw from Carson Wentz week 1 and how he can attack this Rams defense in a way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm like you guys. I won't say like surprised, but I mean, I felt like he did all right. And, I know for you, for Colts fans probably going into the season, that was your number one question mark is, are you going to get like good Carson Wentz, or are you going to get meltdown Carson Wentz, right? And I think you got something in between, right? Like he didn't hurt you guys, right? And last year the Rams played the Eagles. I think it was the second or third game of the year, and the Rams, they picked them off, I think maybe twice, and because they really studied the tape and they knew kind of what he was going to do, and they jumped routes and they knew what was going on. And I think the interesting thing coming into this matchup is how much of like old Carson Wentz can they project, and how much of it is like the Frank Reich version, like with the offense and what they're doing differently in Indy. So the Rams defense, for the most part, is basically they don't allow big plays, big passing plays. So I think Wentz is going to be kind of what Andy Dalton was, in a sense of just dumping it off. And I think this is going to be another game of Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor catching a lot of balls. I think is going to be a lot of short and intermediate passes by Carson Wentz. And so I think, no matter who wins this game, Carson Wentz will probably have similar numbers to what he had against the Seahawks, like not going to throw for, 400 yards. But I think he could still complete a lot of passes. And so I think it's really just up to Carson Wentz and not turning the ball over. And the Rams defense pretty much dares teams to take a shot in like throw it deeper, or kind of let their patience wear out and try and do something that they shouldn't do. So they're all like, okay, do your 13 play drive, fine, but you're not going to have like what Seattle did, like a 4-play drive. So I think it's going to be up to Carson Wentz to just dink and dunk his way all in the Colts to dink and dunk, because the explosive plays really don't happen with the Rams.
Yeah, Lord knows we didn't have a lot of those. We didn't have a lot of those last week against Seattle, right, Cody?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It was frustrating because you're like, we have Paris Campbell, like we have guys that can make vertical plays when given the opportunity, but for whatever reason, they just said that the Seahawks took it away. I'm like, well, teams are going to try to do that. You got to still push it down the field. I thought the play calling was very questionable last week from the Colts personally. I know Derek kind of agrees with me there, but let's talk about the running game, because the Colts running game was not very good either last week. The bread and butter for the Colts is being able to protect the quarterback well and also be able to run the football well. They weren't able to do either of those things last week. I mean, they averaged like 3.3 yards per carry, which is very uncharacteristic of them. So I'm not sure how good the Rams are against the run. I'm curious your thoughts on maybe how the Colts can attack with kind of the three-headed monster they have in Taylor and Hines and also in Mack, how they could potentially attack and help Carson Wentz out so he's not one-dimensional and they're not having to pass it 30, 40 times this game. How can the Colts potentially look to, I don't know if expose is the right word, but how can they look to potentially find a favorable matchup there?
Yeah, and this is since the season is still young. I don't know what kind of sample size we can draw from the Bears game, but essentially, in 2020, the Rams were had the number one run defense. I think they allowed only 3 point something yards per carry, and so this year against the Bears, they allowed 134 rushing yards. And the trick with the Rams and what made Brandon Staley so good last year was disguising the defense. And so essentially, they would have like 5-man box or a light box, a 5 or 6-man box, but still be really effective against the run. They tried that against the Bears, and the Bears racked up 134 yards. So the defensive line actually graded out really well, but they didn't have the supporting cast of linebackers or safeties right behind them for those runs. And David Montgomery broke off a 40-something yarder, which, obviously skews the full numbers, right? But I think that the Rams are going to present a light box to the Colts, but they're going to rotate their safeties and linebackers in their post snap. So it just depends on if the Rams can execute on their plan of presenting a light box, but also stopping the run, or if Jonathan Taylor or Nyheim Hines can really get some daylight and break something off. So I think it just kind of falls into the Rams' plan of like, hey, if you get a 5-yard run, a 2-yard run, a 6-yard run, a 3-yard run, right? It's fine as long as you're not getting the 10-yard, the 12-yard, the 20-yard, the 15-yard. So it's the bend don't break. It's the same thing with the pass. So I think it's really consistency in your offensive line opening holes. But I think it's a 50-50 proposition right now because based off how the Rams played against Chicago in that way. But I mean, they held Andy Dalton 188 yards. So I think the Rams can live with Jonathan Taylor and Hines getting 134 yards combined, 150 yards combined, if Carson Wentz throws for 188 yards. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of the trade-off there.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I guess if that's one thing that Colts fans can get excited for is that, David Montgomery did have himself a good day against the Rams last week. So that does kind of give some enthusiasm for the Colts because, like we said, weren't able to run efficiently at all against the Seattle Seahawks. So hopefully we can establish that a little bit there. And I mean, I overall like your defense. I mean, last week against the Bears, I mean, you guys had some really good tackle numbers. 3 of your top 4 tacklers were guys in your secondary. You had Ramsey, Fuller, and Rapp all making 10 tackles in that game. By the way, I love Jordan Fuller, Ohio State fan, so I absolutely love what Fuller's been able to do since he was drafted by you guys. I'm kind of jealous, to be honest. But, I mean, you guys overall, I mean, I think your bread and butter is not only your defensive line, but your secondary. I mean, Fuller's come into his own, and, Jalen Ramsey, one of the better lockdown corners in the NFL, no questions about that. I mean, is there any way to expose the Rams secondary and finding ways to be able to get these receivers open? Because that was something that the Colts had an issue with in week 1 was getting separation. Is there any way the Colts can attack this secondary?
That's going to be tough. I think that's really not the route to go with unless Frank Reich can really scheme things up or whoever the offensive coordinator is really scheming things up because, I mean, that's the Rams defense is built around their secondary. So think of it like this. Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey there are 2 different universes in the defense for the Rams. In the sun, in each universe, one is Aaron Donald and one is Jalen Ramsey. And all the other players in those areas kind of revolve around those 2. And Jalen Ramsey, what we're seeing this year is that they're unleashing him in so many ways, kind of how maybe you typically feel about like Derwin James, his usage. Jalen Ramsey lined up, I want to say 23 snaps in the slot last game, and then kind of like equal spread on the left and right side. So they basically want to move. They don't want to put him on an island. So it's not like, okay, Michael Pittman is your wide receiver one, so we're just going to put him on Michael Pittman the whole game. He's going to sometimes maybe line up with Mo Ali Cox or Jack Doyle, or he'll spy a running back, or he'll be on Pittman or Pascal or Campbell. Like they just basically they want to get him as close to the line of scrimmage and the action in the box as possible, because the one cool thing about Jalen Ramsey, and this is what I really started appreciating about him, is how complete of a football player he is. His tackling is like for a slender guy, like it's just top notch. And so I think that the Rams are, like I said, really built with their secondary first. So Kenny Young has really evolved into they're really high on him as an inside linebacker, and he played all the snaps for the Rams in the first game, along with Rapp and Fuller and Ramsey and Darius Williams. But like you said, Jordan Fuller, 6th-round pick last year out of Ohio State, he wears the green dot. So it just speaks to their philosophy of safeties being in control of the defense and calling the defense, but also how in his second year, a 6th-rounder is basically like the captain play caller of the defense. And so that's why they were able to let John Johnson go, because their confidence in Jordan Fuller. Taylor Rapp is kind of a guy like almost a hybrid linebacker safety. He really excels at tackling, and he's not so much a coverage guy. And then Darius Williams, an undrafted free agent that they had last year, he just came onto the scene and was, I want to say, like a top 10, 15 cornerback in the league. So they really can rotate these guys around. Darius Williams even played several snaps in the slot, so they don't really have a specific slot corner. All of their guys are very versatile. That's one thing that they preach. So they can move these guys around, and they can shift and rotate pre and post snap into different positions within the secondary. And that's really tough. I want to say last year, I don't really recall many plays where the Rams got beat deep. There was like a couple just blown coverages, but I think the secondary, that's going to be, I really feel like it's going to be a short game for the Colts. If they try and stretch it, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But they're going to have to really kind of scheme something up. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the linebackers a little bit. I'm curious how they are against the pass, because the Colts have some different options at tight end. You mentioned Mo Ali Cox. They have Jack Doyle, who's more of just that reliable guy. They have Kylan Granson, who they drafted, who's more of that vertical guy down the field. Do you think the Colts could potentially find some success going against some of these linebackers that you guys have?
Yeah, I think I definitely think that would be an area to attack, mainly because of the difference in size. And that's what I thought last week against the Bears with Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet. I felt like that was an area for the Bears to exploit against the Rams. But they caught I want to say they had a lot of receptions between Graham and Kmet, but nothing big. So, they were hitting 6, 7, 8 yarders, but they weren't, getting, like Higbee last week had like a 30-something yarder. So I think, yes, the Rams linebackers are really, outside of Kenny Young, who's improved, it's still kind of a question mark. I'd say it's the weaker spot on their defense. But they're not really playing their linebackers as much. They're kind of opting for more kind of like hybrid linebacker safety guys. They don't have that traditional like thumper, and so. Yeah, I think that the Colts should really be. I think Carson Wentz's mobility, I think that might actually really be the key of getting him out, having him scramble a bit, and really I think that's the dimension that really could be the wild card, is how will Carson Wentz, how will his mobility kind of affect the game and maybe extend plays, where then they can hit some gold with that. It was also against the Rams like 4 years ago when he tore his Achilles or his ACL I think, diving for the end zone when he was on the Eagles. So I didn't mean to bring up that painful memory, but
only for the Eagles fans, only for the Eagles fans that watch these.
That's true. That's true. And I really do feel like everything should flow through Hines and Taylor and Wentz's mobility. I kind of feel like those are the real strengths. But yeah, I mean, you never know. Any given Sunday.
Yeah. What's up, football fans? Do you want an advantage on your sports betting this year? You need to download BetQL, the only app you'll need to make smart bets. Their computer model scans hundreds of thousands of bets every year to give you the best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports. Their model covers everything from spreads, over-unders, to player prop bets. If you don't want to use their model and use your own research, that's fine. They can help you with your researching needs. There's sharp data to know who the pros are backing, the line movement so you can jump on betting opportunities in real time, team summaries highlighting previous success and over-unders and spreads, and team lineup, breaking news, and injury status updates. Plus, you can save all your picks in one place to track your success on leaderboards and rankings. Head to the App Store or Google Play now to download BetQL. You can also head to try.betql.co/juice to get started. Enter the discount code JUICE for a 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Find all this information here in the description, and make sure to check out their BetMGM in the description to receive a free year of BetQL. No subscription status is nothing. Also, check out their sportsbook offer pages if you live in an eligible state for free offers upon signing up. Don't miss out on the chance to beat your sportsbooks this football season. All right, so let's kind of switch to your offense. So, I mean, if you're a Rams fan, then what you saw Sunday would definitely be something that, would make you definitely see a very bright light at the end of a tunnel. I mean, Matt Stafford, 20 of 26 for 320 yards, 3 touchdowns, a dang near perfect quarterback rating. I mean, it's about as close as you can get it. And I mean, overall, your receivers, each receiver that you had that caught a ball on Sunday, each had a catch of over 15 yards. So, I mean, this offense, just from one game, really, I want to get to this, the kind of the 2-question part here is, do you believe that Matt Stafford with Sean McVay now is able to open the offense and make it more explosive than what it was when Jared Goff was here originally? And how do you think the Rams will continue to try to attack a Colts defense, which obviously struggled week 1 against Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's no doubt that the playbook is just open. And I think the easiest way to describe the difference between Goff and Stafford is that with McVay, Goff was a student and McVay was a teacher. And with Stafford, they're both peers. McVay and Stafford are both peers. And McVay had to basically draw everything up for Jared Goff. And everything had to be perfect. Offensive line had to be perfect. Todd Gurley had to be like the best player. Like everything had to just be perfect for Jared Goff. He has great arm talent, but he can't process like Matthew Stafford processes. And so I think with the playbook, Matthew, you know the deal. Like you see Phillip Rivers last year, and you can tell he knows everything that's going to happen. He's in full command. Like if he had a 2010 Phillip Rivers arm, it's a completely different story, right? But Matthew Stafford's like that, right? So Frank Reich doesn't have to like teach anything to Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers gets it. He knows what he's doing. And that's Matthew Stafford. So now the Rams can do anything that Sean McVay wants to do. And I think the scary thing if you're a Colts fan in a way is that because Matthew Stafford there were 2 drives where they just threw bombs and they didn't have any plays. The Rams' time of possession was not that long because they just had quick strikes. Is that, the Rams are still like maybe just on page 1 of the playbook because they didn't run that many plays. So, you didn't see any. So that stuff you saw that the Seahawks are doing last week, because the Seahawks have Shane Waldron, the Rams one of the offensive coordinator assistants. You saw a lot of stuff from the Sean McVay playbook last week, the motion, the sweeps, all these things. That's like classic McVay, classic Rams with Goff. But they didn't do that against the Bears because they didn't they didn't run as many plays. So I think that in terms of scouting the Rams offense, it's still a mystery in terms of what they can do, assuming that they can do anything. I can't remember the second part of your question, but I think it's just it's a breath of fresh air. I think, speaking about the receivers, I think that's going to be, whenever I look at a team that the Rams play, I look at the team's secondary, because it's really a pick your poison. You have Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, who's emerging, Deshaun Jackson, and Tutu Atwell, if they decide to play him. I think he's been really named a punt returner now, for now. But you have all those guys, and Darrell Henderson can catch out of the backfield, and Tyler Higbee. Matthew Stafford loves tight end. So it's almost like, who are you going to cover? I mean, the Rams, I saw crazy formations in that first game where, Darrell Henderson and Deshaun Jackson and Tyler Higbee and like Robert Woods were all lined out wide. And it's kind of like, that's insane. Like, what is this? So, Van Jefferson, second rounder from last year, catches that bomb. So I think it's just your second, Xavier Rhodes, I think, to me, aside from your offensive line guys, that's like the guy you don't want to miss against the Rams, because you need the secondary help kind of more than anything. I would really say dare the Rams to run it as opposed to passing it, because the offensive line, we have a new center, and it's still, Darrell Henderson, it's his first time having like the job, being the man. So it's almost like if I'm the Colts, I would kind of see if the Rams can run it and try and stop the pass.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense. I'm curious, talking about sticking with the pass, do you think the Colts have any chance at all to get any pressure on Matthew Stafford, maybe knock him out of a rhythm early? Because obviously the Colts have DeForest Buckner, who now is fully healed from that injury he had last year. He still played through it. And they have guys like Kwity Paye, who they drafted. Kamoko Toure has been limited back in practice. He didn't play week 1, so the Colts get back a little bit of juice there. If there were some positions that you think the Colts could potentially look to go after, what would those be?
I think it's Buckner. Honestly, I remember him from his days in San Fran, and he was a force then. And like I said, the Rams are starting he got some starting reps like 2 years ago. He wasn't great. Then he was injured for like a year and a half. And some people thought he might even be cut. I'm talking about Brian Allen. And he was the first player in the NFL to get COVID, but he was already on like injured reserve, so it didn't matter. But so he was kind of an afterthought, and then he won the job in camp because the Rams had let go of their center from last year, Austin Blythe. And so he's still kind of an unknown, even though he did all right against Akeem Hicks for the Bears. So I think if you're DeForest Buckner, you're lining up over Brian Allen, and I'm sure the Rams are going to try and put some help over there. But in terms of Kwity Paye, if he's playing, our tackles are pretty strong. Andrew Whitworth is just rock solid on the left side, and Rob Havenstein on the right side did a really good job against Khalil Mack last week, and he's a solid right tackle for us. So I think our tackles are the better offensive linemen that we have. Our offensive line is solid. It's not the greatest, but it's solid. But the center is the weak spot if I had to choose one, and I think that's DeForest Buckner city. So yeah, I think maybe bringing in some blitzes, that would probably, disguising some blitzes, that would really be the key. But also Matthew Stafford, like if this was a Jared Goff Rams team, you could get to him. He's a statue, more than Phillip Rivers is a statue. And he can't anticipate pressure. But Matthew Stafford is different, I'm seeing already. He can move around a little bit just to avoid getting hit as much. So I'm not too familiar with other interior linemen or edge players for the Colts, though. So, like, in your opinion, outside of Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner, who else could be bringing the heat?
Well, I mean, I can certainly tell you for the run game and all purposes, that's also Grover Stewart, who basically a lot of times plays the one tech for us. He's a big guy. We paid him this last offseason, 3-year, $30 million contract, one of the better run-stopping defensive tackles in the NFL alongside of a DeForest Buckner. So, I mean, you saying that the interior of the offensive line for the Rams is kind of a weak spot makes me feel a little better having those two guys there in the middle to prevent that kind of push. But then again, at the same time, the Colts had that, and then last week just gave up nearly 100 yards to Chris Carson. So I don't necessarily have too much faith in that at the moment in time. But yeah, nevertheless, those guys are in there. Taylor Stallworth is another one that's kind of coming in as a backup. The edge guys, it really just depends who's going to be healthy. I mean, if Al-Quadin Muhammad's not going to play, I don't know. Tyquan Lewis, who's our guy right now, he's more of our second edge guy. He plays the run pretty well, but hasn't been the most consistent guy at getting pressure. Kamoko Toure hasn't really practiced much yet, and he hasn't really done much. So, the edge guys is very, very uncertain for the Indianapolis Colts. You're looking at more of the interior of the defensive line from Buckner and Stewart creating that kind of pressure.
Yeah, I will say that the Colts have a lot of talent on the edge. They just have a lot of unproven talent right now. Like, Kamoko Toure, you mentioned a couple of years ago, he was one of the best edge rushers in the league. Then he got injured. He's now just finally, that was 2019. So he's just now finally getting fully back to being healthy, right? Which is kind of wild to think about. And then you got guys like Ben Vanagoo, who was a second-round pick a few years ago, who's shown flashes, but really hasn't lived up to that second-round billing. So the Colts have some talent there, I would say, but nobody's really come on and been the guy in terms of pass rushers. But the Colts do play in waves a lot of times. They do have guys that are maybe more well-rounded, well-rounded players like you mentioned to Tyquan Lewis, Derek. He's more of he can do a little bit of both for you. He's not maybe great at either, but he's solid at both. And then you got guys like Toure, who's more of a pass rush specialist. So, yeah, I would say for sure that's where the Colts are going to probably do more damage is in the interior, especially if your guys' tackles are more, better than than they are in the interior. I definitely think that's going to be maybe a point where the Colts could potentially get some pressure early and continue to get some pressure throughout this game. But yeah, it's going to be a fun battle regardless, because there's a lot of talent on both sides of these teams, and I'm really looking forward to it, man. It's going to be fun to see. First off, can the Colts get to Matthew Stafford? We know how good he can be when he's not pressured, but when we saw last year when the Colts were able to get to him when they played the Lions, I mean, they were able to beat them soundly. So, obviously the Rams are a lot more talented than the Lions were last year. So I do anticipate Stafford looking really good again, but it's going to be a fun battle, man. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And I'm also wondering, so Darius Leonard, right? I know he's a beast, but is he just an all-around linebacker, or does he excel more against, I guess, diagnosing the run or in coverage? Like, kind of walk me through a little Darius Leonard, because I'm thinking of Darrell Henderson and a running game. And so is that where Darius Leonard really kind of comes up and really plugs those holes from a linebacker position? Or is he more of sticking with the tight end, or is he just so great at both?
Well, I would definitely say he's more of a run-stopping linebacker. It's where he's made his bread and butter. Rookie year, led the league in tackles. I think in 2019, he was a top 10, PFF's top 10 best coverage guys in all of the NFL. It wasn't just corners. It was Darius Leonard was number 10 he was beating corners. So, this guy was really good in 2019 at that. 2020 was a little bit of a different story. He wasn't as good at that as everybody else was, but still was able to make plays. I mean, that's where another place that Darius Leonard gets a lot of love is his ability to create turnovers. It's the one thing he did do against Seattle was the one turnover that Seattle had all game. Darius Leonard punched the ball out of Chris Carson's hands, and he's done that a lot. He does that a lot. So if you're a Rams coach and you're talking to Darrell Henderson, you are reminding him to never let that ball leave his side, because if it leaves it for a second and Leonard's coming in, then Leonard's going to snap that ball right out of his hand, because that's just what he does. And he does a really good job at it. So, I mean, all around great athlete, all around does everything that you want him to. He's just more of, in my opinion, more of a run stopping guy, because he knows where to plug the correct hole and how to read the offensive linemen when they're blocking.
Yeah, but I will say, like, if offensive linemen can get their hands on him, they can handle him, because he's not that big, right? He's like 220. So, like, they can pretty – he's more of the guy that's, built on that speed and that quickness, and he can make those decisive plays. But you know what? Like, if the offensive lineman can get to the second level, they can block him. I'm just going to say that, because he's not that big of a player. But you're right, Derek. I mean, he's a guy that he just creates turnovers wherever he is. It's like when you need a turnover the most, Darius Leonard seems like he's always there. Creating some sort of play. So, yeah, that would definitely be something that you say, even to anybody who's holding the ball, you say, watch out for Leonard, because that dude, his tomahawk chop is next level, man.
Yeah, he just comes in with that thing and just knocks it straight out.
Yeah, and that's something the Colts really were good at last year, was creating turnovers. It's a little bit surprising they didn't create more, honestly, last week against the Seahawks, because that was something that they were really, really good at. And it's just weird that they – so I do wonder how much last week was just first week jitters, and there's going to be some things that maybe they didn't do well last week that they're going to do a little bit better at now that they're, fully have a week under their belt and kind of figuring things out. Because last year, they were one of the best run defenses as well. And they really, really struggled last week against Chris Carson. And I don't think that's going to be a trend that keeps happening. I feel like the Colts have too much talent to continue to let that happen. But things like that, I just wonder for both sides, were there flukes? What are things that are actually true about both these teams? I mean, based off of what 2020 was, the Colts did not play anywhere to their strengths a week ago.
Yeah, that was a bummer. I was really hoping you guys would beat Seattle. I really dislike Seattle. And I was telling Derek before, though, like the two touchdowns of Tyler Lockett, those were the backbreakers. And that's why I was just curious about your secondary, especially without Rhodes if he's not playing. Walk me through your secondary, because I'm not familiar with most of those guys.
Yeah, so I'll start here, Derek.
Go ahead.
It was so weird. Like, the guys that were supposed to not let the big plays happen, well, specifically Kari Willis, who I know, the first one was just an amazing play by Tyler Lockett. I'll just call it what it is. But the second play was just a miscommunication back there. It was just rare. Like, you didn't see that a whole lot last year. The Colts were pretty good at not allowing those big explosive plays. I would say that there is a place that the Rams can really attack with all their wide receivers. It is the secondary, it is the corners, because the Colts don't have a lot of proven depth right now behind Xavier Rhodes. I mean, Rock Ya-Sin, he's been really up and down since the Colts drafted him a couple years ago. They got some unproven guys that I thought looked pretty decent, all things considered. So a lot of this corner group are very young guys. You do have Kenny Moore, who is really, really good for the Colts. He's probably the best slot corner in the league. But beyond that, there's a lot of unproven guys at corner right now. So I do think the Rams potentially could expose those young corners for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, because the Rams have one of the best slot receivers in the game in Cooper Kupp, and they can slide him everywhere, but he really is a slot guy, and he's such a student of the game, and just he's so good yards after the catch, and such a smart guy. So that will be a good matchup. I always last year I always looked at who's the slot corner for all the opponents the Rams played, just because I felt like that the Cooper Kupp connection, especially with Goff, would tell a lot. But Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford have a connection as well. But that's really good to know, because the Rams, Matthew Stafford will be taking shots down the field, and so I think the Colts, it would behoove them to play a little deeper, some cover two, and try not to let the Rams get behind them. So I think it's just going to be a really good chess match, because, last week with the Colts and the Seahawks, when I watched the game, I think like you guys, I just did not expect the Colts to kind of be so sluggish in some areas on defense. And I don't expect to see that. I don't expect that to continue really. So that But the secondary for the Colts would be the one, if I'm the Rams, I'd try to attack. But I have a feeling that they're going to really try and get the run game going. Mm-hmm. So and they run an outside zone. So if that might be running right into Darius Leonard a lot on the outside there. So if Cam Akers was in there, it'd be a little bit more gap and power. But Hendo was more of a zone. Sony Michel still getting acclimated to the offense, and he only had like a handful of snaps last week. So I wonder if we'll get more Sony Michel. So I think, maybe after the first 4 games of the season, we'll really know what our teams are. But this is still kind of unknown territory.
Yeah. Well, one thing I forgot to mention, and I don't know if you mentioned it already, Derek, the Colts their first half was really bad for their defense. The second half, though, they did really, really well on defense. Like if the offense would have stayed with how they were looking in the first half, I think that game would have been a lot closer. I think the Colts actually might have pulled out that game with how well that Colts defense was playing. For whatever reason, and even going back to last year, the Colts defense has had really like tale of 2 different halves type of games. It's really strange. Like, the first half they allow 21 points. They allow 2 big touchdowns. Second half they allow 7 points. And they create a couple turnovers. They get a couple sacks. So, it's always interesting how this Colts defense seems to rebound back after, especially if they do struggle. They did it last year against Cincinnati, where they just were getting shredded in the first half by Joe Burrow. Second half, they just came to play. So it's interesting the second half adjustments that the defense somehow continues to make. But our biggest gripe has been, well, why can't you do that from the first snap and not the first snap in the second half? So
yeah, and that's the thing. Last year, the Rams were amazing defensively in the second half, and Brandon Staley always made the adjustments in the second half. And I think the Rams held opponents to like league low in second half points. And so and this year against the Bears, I think at the 4-minute mark in the third quarter, the Bears didn't score any again. And so I think it's the second half adjustments for the Rams as well. But I also, looking at the Colts game last week, I think in addition to those stops that the Colts made in the second half, had Frank Reich opted for field goals a couple times, I think that game, that's really where I feel the game went off the rails was it at the end of the first half or whenever, there were 2 field goal opportunities that they passed up, and it could have been a much closer game.
Yeah, the botch snap was not fun to watch.
Yeah, it wasn't. I was there. I was not happy.
Yeah, you were at the game, actually.
I was not there. I did not want to. Yeah. We'll refrain from talking about that. I don't want to talk about it anymore because in case the Carson Wentz haters find it. Okay, so one final question here before we get into score predictions for this game. Talk about your special teams really quick. Your kicking unit. Talk about your return unit and your punting unit. Where does that all stand for you guys right now?
Well, first of all, I just want to congratulate the Colts on getting Rodrigo Blankenship, because he was the guy that I was hoping the Rams drafted this guy, Samuel Sloman, last year drafted him. And while Rodrigo Blankenship was an unsigned free agent. And I was like, what? And everyone knew Rodrigo Blankenship because he was like the best kicker in college. And no one knew who the Sam Sloman dude was. And he was terrible for the Rams. He was terrible. And the whole time I was like, why didn't we draft Rodrigo Blankenship instead? So I just have a little soft spot in my heart for Rodrigo because he's also like a really amazing guy. And then so we signed Matt Gay last year after our kicker woes. Like we went through Kai Forbath, and when you don't have a kicker, it just can go south like in a hurry. And so we got Matt Gay, and he was awesome. It's like we found our Greg Zuerlein again. And so he started off the season. He did great last week. I think he hit a 53-yarder. And so our kicker is fine. Last year, our special teams units, both in coverage and return, were atrocious. We had Cooper Kupp returning punts because apparently the Rams they forgot that we needed a punt returner. And so this year, Tutu Atwell is going to be the punt returner. They will say the reason why they had Cooper Kupp last week return a punt was because they just wanted a fair catch it. And they just wanted to make sure that Cooper Kupp just caught the ball. So Tutu Atwell is the returner, so we have yet to see. So that's we'll see. But the Rams got a new special teams coordinator, guy from the Jags and the Broncos, who's great resume supposedly. So we'll see. But with the first opening kickoff against the Bears run it back to the 50-yard line. So I really think that in coverage, the jury is still out. And then with our punt and kick return, who knows? But our place kicker Mackay is good. So that's the one spot I can definitively say we're okay at in special teams. So I mean that's so, big sigh on special teams. So and I know Rodrigo's great. So I think this is gonna, we both feel good about our kickers. But how about your special teams in terms of return and coverage?
Go ahead, Cody.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have one of the best in the league, honestly. Rodrigo is obviously really good. Rigoberto. So we have Rodrigo and Rigoberto both on our team. It's kind of hard. Sometimes I forget which one's which, and I have to just stop and think for a second. But Rigoberto is, I think he's right up there with any punter in the league. I would wager he's one of the best punters in the league. I mean, this dude is just consistently booming punts. I mean, he in some ways, and again, I know it's probably a little bit extreme, he's giving me the Pat McAfee vibes where he's dominant, man. He's really a weapon that the Colts can use in their punting department. And just because he doesn't have that kind of personality where he's outgoing, he doesn't get noticed as much as Pat McAfee did. But he's really a really fantastic punter. And I think the Colts do have some upside in terms of their kick return department. It's kind of funny, like years ago, the Colts, it's been forever since I've been excited about any returners for the Colts, but Colts have a couple guys to be excited about. Nyheim Hines has primarily been more of that guy in terms of more of the punt return department, right? And he's electric. A couple years ago, returned a couple for touchdowns. I think since 2018 or 2019, one of those years, he's had like the best punt return average of anybody in the league. So, I mean, he's absolutely fantastic as a punt returner. And the Colts kind of go by committee, I think, a little bit with the kick return department. More Isaiah Rodgers has been recently. He actually played a lot more with Xavier Rhodes out last week, but last year primarily handled those kick return departments, had a kick return for a touchdown last year in the Cleveland Browns game. So ultimately, I do feel good about where the Colts are in terms of their special teams, especially the returners. And there's a lot more to be excited about, I think, than in recent years. So excited for both those guys for sure.
Nice. I have one last thing to add about the Rams special team, which I think you'll find interesting. So I don't know if you're aware of our punter, Johnny Hecker, but he's been like the longest tenured Ram, and fans love him, and he's been really good. He's like our number one Pro Bowler in terms of how many times he's been to the Pro Bowl. So he was he makes $4 million a year. So coming into camp, the Rams brought in another guy, Corey Bajorquez, who played last year in the NFL and actually was really good, but he wasn't on a team. So they brought him in, and they faked a punter competition to everyone. And at the end, and so Bajorquez was like amazing in preseason. Like he was the one playing, and he was booming punts everywhere. And then right before roster cuts, Les Snead made a deal with I can't remember what team, and traded Bajorquez for a 6th-rounder. And it just came out that was the whole plan, was to just flip a training camp punter into a pick and keep Hecker, because the whole time the fans are like, oh my gosh, can you believe the Rams might cut Hecker in favor of this guy? And not because they didn't like this guy, but because Hecker is like a fan favorite. And the whole time Les Snead was just doing it to get a 6th-round pick.
So fleece somebody out of a 6th-round pick for a punter. That's insane.
But I mean, I'll tell you this, not only like being a Rams fan has been fun because they've been good the last couple of years, but their front office and their organization is so different in a lot of regard and how they operate, trading the 1st-round picks, but using the compensatory pick formula and hitting on those to Jordan Fullers, the Cooper Kupps, like all these mid-round guys, and just keeping the machine going. It's really been like they traded Marcus Peters away for this guy, Kenny Young, linebacker, who was a throw-in. And now he's playing all 69 snaps last week and has really ascended to like our guy at the linebacker position. So the front office, I think, for the Rams has really been like really interesting in building this team and positioning the Rams to where they are.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I guess it's time for everybody's favorite time of the day for this, and that is the score predictions for today. Trent, will have you go first. Cody will go after him, and then I'll go last.
All right. I think the Rams will get 3 touchdowns and 2 field goals, so I think they're going to have 27. And the Colts, that's really hard for me to say, but I feel like the Colts are going to have 17. I think 2 touchdowns and maybe a field goal, something in that range. I think the real difference in this game is going to be Carson Wentz ball security.
Okay.
Cody, go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, I'm 1 for 1 in my predictions, so hopefully I'm wrong this week. But yeah, I mean, with all the injuries right now to the Colts, it's hard for me to predict them to go out and win this game. I know how well they do after a loss like that, but also you just got to factor in they're just beat up right now. And the Rams are a very good team. I'll give them credit where it's due. So I'm going to go probably 35-17 Rams, and I think that might be going generous because the Rams are a Super Bowl contender, and the Colts right now, they didn't look like a Super Bowl contender last week, and they're banged up. So it's unfortunate. I don't want to go that way, but I have to be realistic too, you know?
Well, Trent took my score, so I can't do that one anymore.
Okay, I'll change it. 27-20.
No, I got you. It's good. I have a different number in mind. I think that this will be a little bit higher than what some people will expect it to be, at least on the Colts end of things. I think it's going to be 31-20 Rams. I just think that, again, the Rams they're just going to score. You know, I just don't think there's any way that they don't, given how banged up our corner room is right now and just how messed up our offense is right now. I mean, I still expect us to score a few touchdowns, but I think that we'll get a few extra field goals this time around. I think maybe Reich won't be quite as aggressive on those 4th downs this time as he was in the week prior, given what happened there. So I'll go with 31-20 Rams here. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this week's preview of the Colts versus the Rams. Want to thank Trent, Rams Talk, for talking with us today. Thank you so much for joining us today and talking Rams and Colts football.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And just remember, the Jets beat the Rams last year. Anything is possible.
Yes, it is the NFL. Any team can win any given Sunday. We do know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Best of luck, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Cody, you want to give him your famous slogan?
Yeah, I guess so. Sorry, I've been a little bit beat down from last week's loss. So, but this is what I tell everybody. I'll tell you as well. Good luck on Sunday, but not too much luck because we want to win, man. We're tired of losing in the first couple weeks. So please, we'd love you guys to give us a win because we know you guys are going to win a lot of games this year. So.
Yeah, you guys can afford to lose one. It's okay. You're going to win 12 games regardless.
Hey, the NFC West is an arms race, man. Like, you can't lose ground. So, yeah, I think it's like whenever I'm talking to other, YouTubers out there, no one wants to say, like, best of luck. So it's more like have a good game, or like how do you wish someone well but not well enough to win. So
yeah,
right.
We just pray no injuries happen to your team.
Yes, exactly. We can all get behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let us know what your thoughts are. Thank you all for the support. And as always, go Colts.
Go Rams.
Once again, thank you to our sponsor, BetQL, the only app you will need to beat your sportsbooks. Find their information along with a 25% off discount code in the description of this video. Make sure you go check that out. And also check out their special BetMGM offer in the description in order to receive a free year of BetQL and other sportsbook sign-up offers and bonuses.